Hi, everyone. My name is Peterson. I am the co-founder of Describe.ai. And so Rich and I are co-founders, but I also am lucky enough to be able to work with Maya over at the Justice Technology Association. I'm volunteering to help on the communications committee over there, and it's a wonderful
I
group.
am Richard DiBona. I come from a traditional tech background and scaling data and all that fun technical stuff. And I wrote a cool tool for my own use about a year ago to search and summarize case law. And I showed it to Cara one night and she's like, whoa, this is pretty cool.
And then just quickly before Rich starts, the other thing I would say, just putting on my pretend legal hat for a minute, is that we are a legal information service only. We are not a legal, we are not providing any sort of legal advice. So there you go. There's my disclaimer. Off to Rich. Thank you.
So this is our website, Describe.ai. I see the green box around, so I assume you could all see my screen.
Yes, sir.
So basically, you could go here, and if you notice, there's no login, there's no register, there's no pricing. It's just you can use it. So you could start typing. Here's some other ones I've done. Gag order, dog chase car, child fell downstairs, cell site location tracking. Somebody said there was a case about exploding food, so I tried that. Dog bit my child. So there, you could just type in anything. If you're a lawyer, like let's say I just type in like contributory negligence and you hit uh enter, and that was not sped up the video. That's actually how fast it is. It's completely instant because everything is pre-summarized. So what happens is it takes the term that you used, and then it uses AI and it finds similar summaries of the legal opinions and presents them to you. So this particular one, we have match scores for each one. This particular one has a nice high match score. You don't usually see them this high, and it's probably because I just use specific terms. But you could see this opinion discuss the concept of contributory negligence, which occurs. So this is more if you're a lawyer and you know what this term is. All of our cases on the search results, you could click the name. Some of them have these sparkles, and that means that what happened was for a million of them and counting, we have what's called the describe abstract, and we used AI to create kind of like a case brief, which so it tells you exactly this is a high level outline of what this case was. So you could see this is procedural history, analysis, holding, conclusion. The AI generated all this. So AI is getting pretty good at this stuff. And then here are the summaries of the original opinion. I like to say this is kind of like cliff notes of the original opinion. Um, so you could read this no matter what your level of, you don't have to be a lawyer to kind of understand this. Um, and then, so this seems to be kind of a longer opinion, but it's still a lot shorter. The summaries are still a lot shorter. And then we have the original opinion. And you could see before our tool, this is what you kind of had to deal with. And so you would need someone with Maya's skill set to understand this. And so this is really hard to do. And you could Google search for things like this and you might get some of it. But if you put in a specific type of thing that's happening to you, it would be a much harder to Google. Um, I don't, Maya, what type of things do people in the access to justice look for? I mean, one thing we use a lot is my landlord kicked me out for no reason. Is there anything more?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot, there's definitely a lot in housing, I would say employment, as well as things like, anything having to do with family law, right? And that's not necessarily going to be searched that way. You know, custody,
Okay.
what do I do if I can't, if I can't,
What do I
if I can't
do?
make it to an appointment or something like that? Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what it would do for that.
It's not what do I do, but
Yeah.
what are the
Um,
Like my
what
ex
has
yeah.
happened if
Yeah.
yeah,
Maybe
that
something
would
like
be advice. So
Yeah,
More
like
Carla?
maybe something like ex-wife not allowing me to visit child or something like
Oh
that.
yeah.
Because then it would show,
Right.
judicial opinions. But
Oh yeah.
that's actually a good conversation that people could hear, because that is about like how you interact with the tool. It's interesting because there are tools out there, and some of them are most certainly in the JTA, that you can actually ask questions more about advice. So
Yeah. So this I did that and it came back instantly. Father claims that the mother and stepfather disrupted his. So you could kind of read through these and see if anything is relevant to you. And then you can, the mailman's here. Sorry about the dog. Everybody's got a dog barking on these calls nowadays. Um, but you can narrow down by a state. So let's say just wanted to do New York. I could search again. And then I see just ones for New York. And this is about visitation with the daughter. So you could see you don't have to have the exact word in there. Ex-wife not allowing me to visit child. It knows visitation, um, father's appeal. So it figures out the concept of what you're searching for and then matches up similar concepts. And this is where it helps people because you don't have to know the words. For on our homepage on our website, we have an example of it's like someone coerced my parent to change their will or something. And then when you search, it'll bring up undue influence. And maybe you didn't know what undue influence is, so you don't even know to search for that. But then when you get back these results, then suddenly you're like, oh, I have a case of undue influence, and you could further research that. So maybe it doesn't bring you all to the way to the finish line, but it might save you that first expensive hour with your lawyer. So you kind of know what the ballpark is and what you're doing. And then if you are a lawyer, and you type anything in like someone slipped on the ice outside my store, this is the type of thing. It's got civil and criminal, and it's mostly done with federal, and we've got all the Supreme Court, and we're going to be adding federal bankruptcy court soon. Um, but maybe you don't know the relevant case law right away for somebody who's just walking through your door of your firm, and you could just quickly find some relevant things for you. And then you could search by most recent. So this would be a most recent in New York. It might be a little yeah. So this opinion pertains to a custody and visitation modification case in New York State. And then he wants to be in with me, the dog. He gets so jealous when I'm talking to anybody else. But one other cool thing about this is, so we search for this, and if you scroll all the way down, you start to get to ones that don't seem as relevant, but the AI found them for some reason. The court has ordered that the mother can only have supervised visitation with the children in the presence of their counselor. So you find things that you didn't even really search for, but maybe this is law that you never even would have considered. And so you could kind of use it in your argument or your brief or however you want to use the law going forward.
And Rich, can I interrupt you there? Because
Yeah,
I would
please.
say and then we'll let Cheryl ask some questions, but one of the interesting things that we've heard from users out in the wild is precisely what Rich just said, is that, it really is a different way of finding relevant case law. So it's not just a direct replacement for what you could find already. Because of the way AI works, it finds like concepts. And so our advisor, Daza Greenwood, he talks about this. It's sort of, I think he termed it sort of the shape of the law. Like, it's really interesting that these tools can help find the shape of the law, and find things that aren't relevant, or what you wouldn't know are relevant unless you just found it. So, and people use it that way. We're getting some pretty cool feedback about how people are using it in their summary judgment motions and different sorts of things. It's been really neat.
And have you all had folks? One of the things that I think is interesting for cases for a product like this is also the inverse, right? Like someone maybe researching what somebody cited in either the brief they filed or the responsive brief, and saying, like, what's the meat of it, right? Without having to read the 96-page decision.
Yep, exactly.
That's
it's research. It's a research tool.
Yeah, it's a research tool, and that's something we're actually going to be rolling out soon, is the ability to feed in a brief, whether you wrote it or received it, and it will go through and tell you not only do the citations seem real, but here's the summary of the case you pointed to. So maybe, um, is this what you meant to do? So we could kind of stop some or help cut off some of the hallucinated cases that we've all read about where people are submitting fake cases because they just use Chat GPT. So we're like a verification tool. And that could be like a paid tier where we charge some small amount for each run of it or something.
Absolutely. And there was a question that came in through the
Sure.
Q&A about, what's this based on in terms of, is it both state and Fed? Can you talk about, and I love your Supreme Court, I think it was the Supreme Court stuff, but can you talk about kind of the coverage that you have?
Yeah. So the coverage, we have this thing called opinion tracker up the top. And and when we first started, this was all gray. Gray meant it was in progress. And so we have every state appellate and Supreme Court going back to 1980, 0101. We just kind of picked that date. And then so all the states are here. And that was a proud moment about 2 months ago when we got all the states in. And then you could see the federal is in progress, and there's what, like 180 appellate and district courts or something. So that it's a big job, and those opinions tend to be longer. So it takes more time to summarize, but you could see we're getting our way through them. So federal district is there, and then federal Supreme Court, we went all the way back to 1760 when they talked about, like, does a British ship owning molasses, who has jurisdiction over it, things like that. Um, yeah, so that's the coverage, and you could see on some of these state ones, it goes up pretty recent to April 12th. So we continually run this and keep it updated. Does that answer the question about coverage?
I think it does, but if
Okay.
Catherine, who asked the question, if it didn't, go ahead and follow it up.
Yeah, are there any other questions
Anything
or
else?
anything?
One more popped up. Let's see what we got here. Oh, no, she said that's perfect.
Then if anybody has a sample search that they want to run, we'll try anything.
Yeah, throw us some terms. It's fun to see it. We can't predict what it's going to do. So
In the wild.
yeah. Yeah, Rich has been having fun looking at like weird maritime law from like the 1700s and stuff.
Yeah, and there was one the other week I just, when I'm testing new things, I just type in random things. So I typed in like food fight, and I came across this case where there's a decision on whether a food tray can be considered a deadly weapon, because apparently there was a food fight in a prison and people started beating each other with trays. So apparently it's based on intent with what you're using. So yeah, you can find anything in here.
Oh, here's one. Looks like Kalina has one.
Oh, Kalina's is great.
What is it?
That's a good one.
How about getting out of a lease in New York City if I don't have heat and hot water? I remember this, Kalina.
Yeah, but you can pull it out of the chat.
Oh yeah, you could just copy it.
Yeah.
You're a fast typer. Not like
I think anyone who lived in New York has had this happen. I remember that for me too.
So the trick is, for people searching, I did not type in New York City, because what I'll do is I'll search, and then I will select the state over here. So that way we don't get it bogged down in like the location of it in right on the thing, because the court itself may not mention the place it happened. So here's one, Supreme Court of New York, new heating system, whatever. So yeah, so you could basically go through these and see. I mean, the relevance scores are a little bit lower on these. The Supreme Court of Brockes County affirmed the dismissal of a complaint against the landlord for failure to provide heat and hot water. So yeah. Isn't it in New York like the Supreme and Appellate Court are kind of reversed, Maya?
Right.
Like, isn't the Appellate is higher than the Supreme? Yeah.
And also, this might be a good time to talk about how we don't have the like most local courts, which is actually interesting because that's where a lot of the access to justice stuff actually is happening. So, Rich, why don't you mention that? And then
we don't have local district or superior courts for the most part. We just have the Appellate and Supreme because they tend to have the precedential opinions. And yeah. So I mean that's
A
all
lot
out
of,
there,
yeah.
and we eventually we may read that in, but I don't know if people want to be basing their cases on local.
Yeah, that's true. And then the whole other part of the law, right, is case law is one thing, but there's also regulations and statutes and all that stuff that's actually like, here's the law of the moment that, you know, relates to whatever thing it is you're thinking about. So cool thing about a tool like Describe is you could really ingest anything you wanted into it and it would treat it the same way. It's so that's an
Yeah, and
interesting area.
along those lines, we've been approached by um Australia and India and what was it, Uganda, Cara?
Mhm.
Because they have English speaking courts about whether we could summarize their opinions too.
Mhm.
So we're trying to figure out how we get the bandwidth to do something like that. But
Yeah, if
I mean,
anybody
with
knows how
both,
to clone Rich, is
yes.
there any biotech people out there?
So yeah, so that's the demo. It's so easy to use, and I did make a demo video myself on here if you ever want to see it on YouTube. So
Mhm.
where I go through and do a search and stuff.
Excellent. Well,
Yeah,
one last question then,
sure.
as we close out, kind of thinking about, you know, as I was prepping for this, one of the things I was thinking about with your product with Describe is I was kind of going back to some things I heard late last year around kind of small firms and mid-sized firms' ability to afford tools, right? So, like, yes, we have the access to justice thing, consumers and things, but even in law, in the field of law, there's been a lot of challenges because Westlaw and Nexus can be very out of the price range of certain firms, and you end up with ChatGPT, crappy things getting written. And when we saw case text get absorbed by TR, one of the things that I heard from a lot of mid-sized firms was, great, now there's nothing left. What's gonna, you know, what am I gonna do? That's what I was using. And you had VLEX and case text merge, or VLEX and fast case merge. And so there aren't a lot of tools that kind of fit that space in the market now. Where do you all, I think Case Text originally was kind of thinking they would be in the same space that you are, but it turns out $650 million is very enticing. So where do you guys see kind of things going? How do you see your spot in the market with some of those recent changes?
Yeah, I'm happy to take that one. And so another soapbox, I have many soapboxes. So another one I'll stand on is I'm like a true believer in this access to justice stuff. Like and I'm not implying that the other people aren't. I just, you know, I'm sure it is very hard to turn down $650 million, but not that anyone's offering. But I think the saddest thing that could possibly happen with a moment like we're in right now with AI is if it just ends up serving the already well served more, right? So imagine if it just becomes a tool and a resource for the people that can already afford the most. You know, they can already afford the best lawyers, or they already are the best lawyers, or they're the biggest firms. And of course they're going to have it and they're going to use it. But if they are the only ones able to use this technology, then the deck is going to be even more stacked than it is now against everybody else. And that's just not the place I want to live. That's not the country I want to live in, right? So we have to have agitators. We have to have people who are willing to, you know, put their money where their mouth is and create tools that are going to help break that up, because it's pressure. And we all know monopolistic sort of economies are really bad for consumers. So we need more of us. And, you know, Justice Technology Association has a whole bunch of us like in there working for this kind of thing. And, you know, it's great to hear there's impact investors that are interested in this space, because, you know, what a tragedy it would be if we come out of the other side of this revolution and we just have the fat cats getting fatter, right? Let's not do that. So I know that's very sort of rose-colored glasses and a bit, you know, naive sounding, but it is our choice and we get to decide that. So let's make some good decisions.
I mean, I think that's even more relevant when we're talking about generative AI, right? I mean, there's a great opportunity for collected and generated data like this to teach LLMs to feed justice tech solutions that the public can trust. Because right now they're just out there using the free version of ChatGPT 3, and they don't and relying on information that we know is not accurate, but it's better than nothing from their perspective. So I think that that's a really huge area where generative AI and content like this can really start to level the playing field and have it be less of a two-tiered system of justice rather than exacerbate the two tiers.
I love it. And Rich, close it out for us.
Bring it on home. I've used an analogy, like if you look at like Westlaw and LexisNexis and some of those as a full version of Photoshop, right? Where it's got all of these features, all this fancy stuff, but maybe we could create a tool that has like 80% of the features and could be like 20% of the price or something. You know, there's a whole, I think there's a market for that where people don't need all of the advanced things. And, you know, we could find a whole thing and let them keep hunting upstream.
Yeah, be the Canva of the legal tech world.
That's exactly what I was envisioning. So
Canva's
perfect.
they're doing really well.
So.
And what I heard there is it's going to take more than $650 million to acquire Describe, in case anyone's.
Oh yeah, 651 million.
We do talk about that, and Cara and I, we would, no matter what happened, if somebody came up to us, we would say we really, part of it has to be that we keep a lot of this free stuff free. Like we don't want to just like we want to keep it the way it is, you know. So if you want to buy it and have it as make yourself look good by having this access to justice piece, then we'll talk, but we're not gonna like just roll it into the other thing and charge $500 a month for it.
Nope.